Good morning and welcome to Essex County College's Virtual Cafe. This is episode 15, Egypt 101. I have the distinct pleasure of joining special guest Dr. Robert Spellman on this journey today to Egypt. One of my favorite coworkers, one of my favorite people at this institution. He has a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge from his journeys all across the world, and we love to hear him speak. And we're lucky enough to have him with us today to take us to Egypt. Good morning, Dr. Spellman. How are you?
How are you this morning?
Doing well, sir. I'm glad you could join us. So we're excited for you to take us to Egypt and share some of your knowledge with us.
There's some fascinating things about Egypt. I've been fortunate enough to go to Egypt 9 times. Poor boy, growing up in Newark, had quite an opportunity to see the world. So just wanted to point out some things to our wonderful, I call my students great ones, and you're all great ones. And you will see, I hope in this short period of time, how great the Egyptians were. Most people don't realize the Egyptians were people of, they were called by the early sociologists as Negroid, and there were only 3 races in that time they used to use, but I'm going to show you a definition where it's not in use now because everyone has a multiplicity of different bloods in them, and we're all great people. But what has happened with the Egyptians is they've been kind of left out to the extent that Europe has been superior, or that even Asia has been superior. Well, I want to show you a few things about the Egyptians and let you make up your own mind. And I'm proud of whatever I am. If I was green or orange, I'm just glad to be what I am. And if I could go back and come back to something else, I'd come back the same me. So I've been very fortunate in my life to have some great experiences. So whenever you get ready, we're ready to go. I want to talk about Egypt. We call it the genius of the Egyptians. And they were an ingenious people because they lasted for centuries, the longest lasting civilization over what we call the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. A lot of dynasties took place. So when we talk about Egypt, we talk about the genius of these people. And they worked under horrendous conditions because in Egypt, 95% of Egypt is desert or rock. And then 5%, the Nile River. The Nile River is the key to life in Egypt over this period of time. A very hot region, not too much water, not too much in terms of vegetation, except for around the Nile. So they call it the gift of the Nile. But the Egyptian mastered some areas, what we call stacking and piling, which means you put one thing on top of the other and you seal it in between, and as a result, it stands. And that method was used to build a pyramid. But the only remaining 7 wonders of the world in existence today are the pyramids of Giza. So we'll look at that. Hydraulics. How did they move 70-ton limestone blocks? And in the Great Pyramid of Giza, or Cheops, that we will study, you will see they used 2 million 70-ton limestone blocks. How do you move them with precision? How do you cut them first, but move them forward? And then how do you come up with a system that has no cement in it? It's just tightly fit together. But they mastered hydraulics, how to move these blocks. And they used to put them on wood, sort of like bark or tree bark, and then they would pour water on top of it to make it easier slippery so they can bring it up. I'm going to show you a picture of that. They also mastered mortuary science. Why? Because the Egyptians believed in the afterlife. They believed that whatever you were in this life, you would be in your next life. So the king was the super person. He would become like Osiris after he left this earth. But they put emphasis on the mummy. Had to have a mummy. And I saw a man in the Egyptian Museum who had been dead 3,000 years. He looked like he was sleeping. So they mastered that mortuary science, how to embalm and how to make a person look like they did the day they just went to sleep. And Dr. King's body, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s body, if you were to go to Atlanta and go into his tomb and open up, you would see he was embalmed according to the Egyptian method. Then you might not know, but the Egyptians gave us paper making. It's a plant called a papyrus, and I want to show it to you. And last but not least, there was in stone cutting. They could cut precision. They had crude tools, but they could cut stones to exact right angles. Last but not least, because of the heat, and at 10:30, I always got finished with my work, whatever I was going to do by 10:30 because it was 140 degrees. But the pores of the skin would have to be cleaned out. The Egyptians perfected perfumes and oils and ways and means of dealing with the skin. And so even today, people who have acne, go to the Egyptian solutions. So here's an example of stacking and piling. You can build one on top of the other, but the one supports the other. It goes up, but it's sticking together. And that's what we have with the Great Pyramid of Giza. Let's get it straight right now. No one is better than anyone or superior than anyone. We are what we are because of the geographical or geological state in which our ancestors found themselves. And when you live below the equator, these people would become brown and black to absorb the ultraviolet rays of the sun. People who went north, like into Denmark and England and places like that where the sun comes out 4 months out of the year, and that's it. So their skin tends to be lighter, eyes blue, but no one is more superior than anyone else. And we look like we look because of where our geological ancestors found themselves. So in this case, in Egypt, Egypt was a black nation. The Ethiopians, the Egyptians, even going up to what we call Syria and Israel today, that was Canaanite country, but that was also a part of where black peoples live. And the only reason I reemphasize this is because we've been left out. When I went to school, I was taught that everyone was just one race, white race, and that's not true. So let's look at this definition very quickly. It's called Negroid, and that was the term used. It's in anthropology. It says of relating to or being a major human racial classification, traditionally distinguished by physical characteristics such as brown to black pigmentation and often tightly curled hair, and including peoples indigenous to sub-Saharan Africa. Look at those last 5 words. No longer in scientific use because it is absolutely impossible. So when they went into the tombs and they opened up the tombs, even back in Ptolemy's time or Alexander the Great's time, they all found these pieces, and there's no doubt that these were Negroid people, people of black people who, because of their geological reality, the skin absorbed, the hair that was curly, and some people used to call it woolly, but that was the protection against the ultraviolet rays of the sun. But the gift of the Nile, Herodotus, the Greek historian, called it the gift of the Nile because of the Nile. They were able to build and keep a civilization and in an ingenious way, build temples, write and create paper, create perfumes, all the things that they did. And of course, building the Great Pyramids. Each year, the Nile used to overflow and it had what it was called regurgitating. It was like a fertilizer called silt, SILT. That was very important because those organic deposits would settle along the Nile when it overflowed, but that would be the fertilizer for crops. So many times you lived along the Nile and the palaces were along the Nile. So Herodotus called this the gift of the Nile. And it's the longest river in the world. The Nile River is 4,150 miles long. It's very unusual because most rivers fly from north to south, but the Nile flows from south to north rather than. So, and it ends up in what we call the Blue Nile, or White Nile, up in Khartoum near the Sudan. And of course, the longest river in the world and then they built this Aswan Dam, which would help people bring water in. But to do that, they had to either put the tomb of Ramses underwater or they had to do something about it. So the Metropolitan Museum in New York, Jacqueline Kennedy, so many of them, they raised money to raise that tomb up. And so the Nile, the great Nile, I've been fortunate enough to travel on those little boats and go around the curve. You better not fall off because they have schools of catfish there that are almost like barracudas. You have crocodiles, you have all hippos, you have all kinds of animals. But this old map shows you that this is Egypt, maybe when it was many years ago in the Old Kingdom, New Kingdom. But we had Nubia, which is today's Ethiopia. And then we had Memphis and we had Thebes. These were the great capitals. And as you go up what we call Israel today and Syria today, that was part of Egypt. And we're on the construction site now. Can you imagine? 4,000. See, that great pyramid you're looking at was built 2,500 BC. Can you imagine 4,500 years old and it's still standing? And we're on the construction site. Look at the precision of those blocks. That's the work that they conducted. And they did it with, they would use labor, but they would use pulleys and they would go up in ramps. And that's the main theory they believe to have had built with a set of sophisticated ramps. And you can see the little people going up as they built this great pyramid. And I have films, I have other things that if you're interested, we can do in another session. But this 2,070,000 limestone blocks, it took 20 years and 200,000 men to build this one pyramid. And it had passages. Imagine all that weight. Look at that precision building. You're looking at a building that was built 4,500 years ago, and look at the precision of those blocks. And you would go through, and I've been through some of those tunnels, but you have to button your back pocket because it's a lot of what we call pickpockets there. You have to come out, your money is gone. So when you bend down, you better know what you're doing. But look at that, students. Look at those blocks that were put there some 4,500 years old. And look at your little teacher here. I'm standing on the second level of the pyramid. I've gone up higher. I'm an old man now. I don't go up as high as I did. But can you imagine the thrill that I had? And they put a facing over it. In other words, they took the facing off, but they put a facing over the whole pyramid. and it was fantastic. Here's a group that I was with, and I'm standing out. I'm about a mile, maybe 2 miles away from the Great Pyramid of Giza. And my grandfather went there in the 40s, and that's him up on a camel. And he sat by the Sphinx and the pyramids. And I said, as a youngster, and as I'm challenging you as students, never say what you won't do. You're going to get there. You're going to travel the world like I've been blessed and fortunate enough to do. But you have to have heroes. You have to have inspiration. You have to have somebody. And I said, boy, I see him. And I looked at that picture when I was a youngster. I said, I sure would like to go to Egypt and be on a camel like him. And lo and behold, here you see a teacher riding a camel on the same spot that my grandfather did in 1948. So the reality of it, because I was a little skinnier then, but my point is, I'm riding the camel Penelope. It's a great thing. A camel can move. And so look at that building. Look at this Egyptian brother standing on that side. Look at the people who are gathering, some sitting on those 70-ton blocks. And Cairo is a great city. And I hope you're enjoying my little trip our trip. This is the Nile River today. And it's traffic, it's terrible. And they have one rule in driving. No rule. You can cross over. They have more accidents, reckless driving, but that's modern Cairo. And these, of course, are some of those limestone. And we use limestone in kitchens today. And you see the limestone, it's a stone that's, you can bang it with a knife, and you can do all kinds of things. But when you hear Pharaoh, the Egyptians, it meant big house, big house. And the Pharaoh was treated like a god. In the center there is Ramesses II. The Pharaoh, they believe, was there when Moses and the Israelites left Egypt. But look at his nose and his lips. No doubt about it. He was what they used to call Negroid extent. And you could tell the Pharaoh by his headdress, his beard, and a cobra, which was a symbol of the Pharaoh. So next time we get a chance to go and talk together, we're going to look at the history of the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. And there's some names you might not recognize, but I'm sure you all will recognize this one, which is Tutankhamun, which King Tut's tomb was discovered in 1923. We don't have time to go through the Egyptian gods and goddesses, but I'm having a great time. And this is just the introduction to world travel. That's Anubis, the jackal god, who would come. And we saw him coming. He was the god of the underworld. You know, there was time to go when you saw this jackal god coming towards you. So there's so much for me to show you, and it's visual, and you get an idea of how exciting it is to be a part of Essex County College. I enjoy my job. Faculty, I think, I have one of the best jobs in the college.
Amen.
And there's nothing like learning students. Like a necropolis, that's a city of the dead. See, and an acropolis, like in Athens, is a city up on the mountain. So the necropolis is a city of the dead. And there you see just a couple of things, and I'm going to end here, that were in the tomb of Tutankhamun when they found it. And I have a couple of those things right in my study, in other words, replicas. But let's finish with this. Major contributions of the Egyptians. The calendar. Did you know that the 365-day-a-year calendar was given to us by the Egyptians? They knew where the North Star was. They knew Pythagoras' theorem. C squared equals A squared plus B squared. Now, Pythagoras lived 400 BC, but this was known 2500 BC. But the Egyptians gave us the calendar. They gave us mortuary science methods. They gave us sophisticated hydraulics. They gave us papyrus paper. And without that, we wouldn't have a lot of records that we have today. And they gave us perfumes and fragrances, and they were monumental builders. My last point, paper, we take for granted. You go down to the Best Buy, you go Staples, just buy packs of paper. Well, they had nothing to write on. So there's a plant on the Nile River. It's over here, and it was called papyrus. And they would cut it, and then they would strip it and make strips out of it like you would celery. And then they would put it into water and soak it. And then they would, after they soaked it, they would bring it up and they would let it dry and they would weave it over, under, over, you see, right here on the edge of this one. And they would create the paper, and then they would take a mallet and they would bang it together and they would be able to write on it. So I'll give you just kind of an introduction to Egypt, but it's fascinating to know that you had a people, particularly Black people, so probably a genius group of people who were able to undergo many, many things. So I want to thank you for the opportunity this morning.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Okay.
So we want to thank Dr. Spellman for coming on the Virtual Cafe and taking us to Egypt. This will be an installment series of Dr. Spellman's journeys across the world. We want to thank you for tuning in for Egypt 101, Episode 1. It's a pleasure to have Dr. Spellman with us to tell us and share these experiences for some of us who have never been to places like this and never got to experience any of these awesome wonders of our world that we live in. We hope that you're doing well. We hope that your family is doing well during this time. And we'll see you again on the next episode of Virtual Cafe. Take care.